So this week, episode 3 of the Enablement Redefined podcast. I'm super excited to have Stephanie on. Without further ado, Stephanie, I'll give you a quick intro, and then I'm very excited to take it from there and introduce everybody to a big thing happening on your side of the woods. So I'll kick it off to you.
I always get like, it's always like introductions are always a little bit weird. I'm like, what do I say? What do I go into? My name is Stephanie Middaugh. I am the head of enablement or leading the enablement efforts at a company called Pinecone. We're a vector database company. I've been doing enablement for the past, I think 8 or 9 years now at this point. But I came into enablement by way of sales operations. And before that, I was going to be like a high school English teacher. So I feel like I fell into everything. Currently based in Utah, originally from Southern California. I don't know what else to say.
Well, I'll take it from there because I
Please.
have
Yes.
finished your most recent book. So Stephanie is a recently published author.
I know.
If you are listening to this podcast, you're watching the podcast, I definitely suggest it. It's worth the $10. It's
Thank
one of
you.
the few resources out there that puts together the combination of tactical and strategic approaches within the enablement model. The 5-step or the 5-phase enablement model is something that I think really puts a great picture on what the enablement function has been missing, rather than just constant tactical, like, do this if you're in enablement. It's very relative to where you're at, in my opinion, in the maturity model. And I love the fact that you started with spontaneous enablement as
Yes.
the first start, because from my point of view at Letter, the amount of conversations that I have with people that fit directly in that bucket of spontaneous enablement is sad, very sad. I feel sad for them,
But
honestly, but it's so necessary.
it's a necessary sadness. Is that like is that a
Agreed,
thing?
yes, because it paints a very, very clear picture of, like, okay, this is the most fragmented, disparate process and function that you've ever created, but you've
Yeah.
put high expectations on them. So with that being said, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what got you to the book,
Mhm.
how you got to the 5 phases of the model, and anything else you'd like to add, kind of, to fill in the gaps there.
Yeah. This is so exciting. This is like the first podcast I'm doing like post launch of the book. So I
Right.
actually get to so like my talk track is maybe going to be a little bit janky about it because I haven't done this yet. No, so I actually developed the model. This sounds so fancy and adult. I developed this last year. I was doing consulting. So I got laid off back in February as part of the tech bloodbath of layoffs that happened in 2023. Um, and I was working with a client on my consulting firm, and they had like a homegrown enablement person that just didn't quite work out, and they were looking to hire on a new person, but they were like, what should enablement be like at our organization? And I've always like had this thought in my head, and this is by no means like the first and only enablement maturity model. There's other
Right.
typically what I found was like vendors kind of like in the space that came up with their own version of the maturity model. And like jumping off of kind of like that based on like all of the experience that I have, that's ultimately kind of like where I came up with this idea of, okay, we've got these 5 different stages of enablement maturity, and to like our earlier point, like you have to start somewhere, and you can't really do need to like work through like each and every stage, and you have to understand like what's actually possible for the company, specifically, because not every company. So the stages of the maturity model are spontaneous, on demand, structured, advanced, and then optimal. Not every company is going to get to optimal or advanced level of maturity. It's just not possible with the market that they're in, the process that they've got in place, or like internal process roadblocks, random shit, that's happening or whatever. So I think it's important to call out that like every stage of enablement is important, but you at that particular company in that particular moment in that particular market condition, you might not be able to push your company forward or your practice forward, and that's okay. And that was one of the big things that I wanted to make sure that I called out in the book is like, this isn't meant to like throw people into this existential crisis of like, I'm not doing enough. We do that
Right.
to ourselves already on a pretty consistent basis. That's not the means of this book, or that's not the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book is to give you kind of a framework of, okay, I want to be at this stage of enablement maturity. We're not quite there yet. What are some of the pieces that I can put into place or foundational structures that I can start creating in order to maybe push us in the right direction? And I think that's a really important call out. And especially like speaking from somebody who I play in the startup enablement space, it's where I love to be. I think maybe I'm a masochist a little bit because it's just like so stressful and crazy, but I love it. But you can't take like a Series A company and expect them to be an advanced or like optimal. You're like 10 years plus out from something like that.
Right.
Um, but it doesn't mean that I can't take some of the foundational stuff and be like, that's my North Star. That's where I want to get to. How do I back into that? What are the pieces that I need to put in place now in order to do that? And that's kind of like where all of this kind of came from, was that conversation with that client of just like, we want to get there. We're nowhere near there. That's okay. Here are the stepping stones and the blocks in order to like move in the positive kind of right direction for that.
Yeah, I love that. And especially when you talk about the startup world, it is a total bloodbath for so many reasons. Like
Yes,
you, a lot of startups start as sales oriented, right? It's growth at all
sure.
costs. And now with the economy, things have changed, right? It's now, you know, what's the right
Revenue at
word?
all costs.
Revenue at all costs, but efficient growth, right? So
Yes.
enablement is kind of in this little middle ground, right, where it's always been a cost center, but like it's just enough to get sales going, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've talked about on this podcast before, I think with every other person that's been on, is the enablement function sits at an interesting intersection, because if you look at some of the metrics for sales reps, for example, I think, what is it, like 38% of their time is spent selling. And I
Yeah.
think if people start to like look at enablement more cross-functionally, which where you get to a lot in the book about the cross-functional advantages and being intertwined with go-to-market and things like that. If you start that early, like I think you have such an advantage.
Yeah.
So like to kind of bring down the chaos, especially that we see right now. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like, can you talk about from your experience? You know, have you seen the Series A or Series B company
Mhm.
that's been good at it, and what does that look like?
Yeah. I would say the most unique, so the position that I'm in right now at Pinecone, this is actually the company that I've been brought in the earliest, from like an enablement perspective. So when I joined the organization just shy of a year ago, it was 15 total people on go-to-market. So like AEs and SEs and customer success and customer support. 15 people total. Right now, I'm actually in the midst of planning like our mid-year kind of QBR, and we're at 50 plus 50-ish people on go to market. So really being able to like be there right from the start of kind of everything, and most everybody being like significant leadership like changes and additions or whatever, like I've been there to be a part of it, and initially just like right in there with like like a regular cadence. We just brought on like a director of solutions engineering, for example, and I like he's coming through onboarding next week. And I was like, hey, we're getting like a cadence on the calendar for like every other week. We're going to like stay really closely aligned, making sure that me and product marketing are really closely aligned. So, like, for me, I think enablement tends to be so much of that bridge between sales and another department, between like
Mm-hmm.
revenue and another department, between like product marketing and like whatever. Like, there's always contention, and it's natural between sales and marketing, and between sales and customer success, and between customer success and customer support, and like where there's always going to be silos, there's always going to be this friction. And I think enablement really can end up being like a little bit of a referee, and even just like the department that kind of like sees all and knows all, I don't know. And you can easily make those connections between like, hey, actually this team is doing this exact same thing that they're working on. We need to like
Right.
collaborate those efforts together. Or this department's going rogue in the completely opposite direction. We need to like bring them back together because they're not actually moving in the direction that we like need them to. And it can be frustrating. And I think one of the things people ask me all the time, like, oh, what certifications should I take, or like what skills should I develop? And I tell them all the time, like, you should take like a basic psychology class to understand like and it's for real, like
Yeah.
emotional intelligence, psychology, like understanding how people work and how they interact with each other. Like that's what I think is like
So
one
true.
of it. If you want to be like a good enablement professional, that's one of the skill sets, one of the many skill sets that you should absolutely kind of like invest in, is just like understanding how does the human brain work? Like how do personalities work? How do you function with personality? Because that'll make or break you any day.
No, for
So
sure.
random tangent, but there you go.
Well, that's so true, right? Because like on the sales side alone, not to like pick on the salespeople, but they have quotas to hit, right? They have
Yeah,
different personalities than somebody that works in data analytics or product marketing or whatever it may be, right? And they have
yeah,
arguably a more high pressure job. So balancing those relationships
hmm,
is paramount for sure.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
you've spent a lot of time, at Zoom and Divi and WorkRamp and now Pinecone, and now this is your earliest role here at Pinecone. So let's talk about kind of the technology stack that you've used over time. Like a lot of the
Yeah.
conversations that I have, whether it's on the podcast or with prospects here at Letter, is I'm not sure what the right tool is to use, right? Whether it's for outreach sequences or recording
Hmm.
videos or what have you. In your experience and with your clients, a two-part question. One, what's the right answer? Like, what's the right for them, if there is one? And
Sure.
more specifically, maybe what's the right approach to finding technology? Because I think the sales space, broadly speaking, revenue and sales, has just been
Hmm.
totally overloaded with hundreds of tools.
Yep.
And it's just like, I don't even know where to start. So I guess
Yeah.
what's your perspective on the current state of the tech stack, and what should we do? Like, if you could provide an answer to that one.
Loaded
It
question.
might be the golden
Um,
the golden question, but yeah.
you're not wrong in that I would say the sales go to market revenue space, like vendor space, is absolutely insane. So you mentioned I worked at WorkRamp, which was a learning management system, and I mean I dove right into this, and this was one of the things that I trained my BDRs on and my AEs on, and like kind of reinforced to them, from especially from like an enablement perspective of like, here's the tech stack that you guys are up against trying to get in front of our prospects.
Right.
And I can tell you right now, I am the worst person to prospect to, because I don't respond to anything. And God bless them. Like I have my reps ask me all the time, like, what would you respond to? And I'm like, nothing, literally nothing. Like
Yeah,
I don't cold call, like I don't answer, anyway.
I'm the same
Um,
way. Silent.
from
Do
I'm
not
gonna get like
disturb.
blown up in my inbox. They're like, Stephanie's gonna be like, I'm gonna reach out to her. From a tech stack perspective, I would say it very much depends on the priorities of the business as far as like what's needed. So when I've usually at like hyper growth startup organizations, onboarding tends to be a important piece because they're just like getting butts in seats as quickly as possible. You need to get people ramped as quickly as possible. More often than not, I end up being like a team of one, for a considerable amount of time. So while I do, and I believe heavily in self-paced content in addition to like live virtual kind of training content, because I think
Right.
both have a place in kind of learning and adult learning styles. So for me, just about every company that I've been at, I've always asked for and pushed for an LMS or a learning management system right out of the gate, so that I can kind of like, it's like it's like the infomercial from like a while ago, like the rotisserie chicken, you just like set it and forget it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anything that I'm having, like when I have those live virtual sessions, when I have in-person boot camps, while inevitably there are going to be slide deck presentations, what I want it to be is more discussion based and like hands-on kind of
Mhm.
engaging activities. And I hear this all the time. I want this to be an engaging Zoom call. It like
It's
doesn't
like,
really exist.
yeah.
If you're
Oxymoron.
presenting a slide deck on a Zoom call, nobody's really going to be engaged with it. But that's where I'm like, okay, if I'm regurgitating the same talk track again and again and again in a lecture style format, that belongs in a self-paced training. What then belongs in like a live discussion is, okay, let's break this apart a little bit more. So as an example, Pinecone is a very technical product. So I have self-paced training content built in our LMS system right now that new hires go to. We host, I'm lucky enough to that our company is willing to invest in in-person onboarding experiences for our teams. So they're automatically assigned to self-paced content that walks them through a bunch of stuff. And then our in-person sessions become more of that dynamic, engaging kind of
Mm-hmm.
conversation where now we can actually, I've got my like technical SME, like our expert in the room where we can actually dive into the pieces. So for me, getting back to your initial question from a tech stack perspective, what's the priority of the business? Is it hiring? Is it new hire onboarding? Then you should probably look into an LMS because your time is valuable as a 1-2 person enablement
Right.
show. And your manager's team or time is also incredibly valuable. So anything that they're regurgitating on a regular basis, what are the fundamentals of forecasting? What are the fundamentals of like how to use outreach or whatever our outbound tool is? All of that should live in self-paced content. That way it takes the burden off of whomever it is that's delivering it on that like reoccurring basis. Again, rotisserie chicken, set it and forget it into the LMS. And then focus on, so like outbound prospecting. Shockingly enough, everybody is like just crazy to get like leads in the door. Who would have thought? So like those outbound tools like an outreach or a sales loft or a gong engage just launched their kind of
Mm,
outbounding tool. Figure out what is important to the business, what the priorities are, and then determine what tool is like essential and or needed. And
yeah.
like every vendor in the space is going to tell you that like they're essential for your tech. Like, do you absolutely have to have an LMS? No. Like, do you need an outbounding sequencing tool? No. Would it make your life a hell of a lot easier, your reps lives a hell of a lot easier? Yup. But
Exactly.
figure out like, and this is something that I've actually had the conversation like internally of like tool fatigue is very very real for reps. So you've got your Salesforce CRM or your HubSpot, you've got Sales Navigator, you've got Outreach, you've got, you know, Zoom Info, you've got like Lean Data, you've got like all of these tools that they're
Yeah.
touching on a regular basis. And do you want them to like go into like an LMS and a CMS and like what and like do all of the things? Good God, like it's no
And then good
wonder.
luck finding any information, like
Yeah,
especially for you or any other technical product, right? Where it's like
yeah.
I don't remember what we had learned 10 days ago. Now I have to go
It
find it. Like,
lives
yeah,
somewhere. Yeah. And
exactly.
then we complain about them saving stuff on their hard drive, but in reality, that's really
Right.
the only place that they can like go and find the thing. So I would say like figure out your company's priorities, understand the existing tech stack and all of the different like observe a rep, figure out how many clicks it's taking them to
Mm,
do a simple thing from a like prospecting. What all tools do they have to go into? How many clicks are they using? Are they actually being productive? Or are they just like clicking around on their screen for like 2 hours and they've sent an email? So
mm,
like
exactly.
understand the entire ecosystem.
So as an enablement leader, how do you think about productivity for your sales team? Is that like a metric that you track, or what's kind of like the North Star as it relates to
Yeah.
productivity?
To me, like my initial gut reaction is like productivity is like how productive are they being as reps or and usually to me that means like are they sending enough emails? Are they outbound
Mhm.
prospecting? Do they have enough meetings or like whatever? Um, in reality, what it should be is defined by the company. So like at Divvy, we were super like highly transactional. We wanted everybody like having multiple meetings a day.
Mm,
But during my time at like Data Stacks, for example, much longer sales cycle. We were like enterprise focused at the time. So like in that instance, it's like we don't expect our reps to have a lot of meetings on the calendar. We don't expect them to be doing a lot of like discovery. They're probably doing more research. They're probably like understand building business plans, mutual action plans, things like that. So I think, and I like, you're going to hear me say this like again and again and again. It depends, and you need to define it for your business because you cannot and should not shove a square peg in a round hole. And it like if I try to take my playbook from a large enterprise company and drop it into a super transactional, less
Yeah,
than 15 day sales cycle, what the hell? Like why? Ah.
no
And it's the
chance.
same thing with like a methodology too. If I try to like drop
Yeah,
a med pick or a challenger sale into some of these things, maybe it doesn't make as much sense. What what are the goals of the business? Who are you selling to? What does your sales process look like? What's the ideal sales process look like? What are the levers you can pull? And then like come back to that with like a definition. So like rep productivity is going to depend, and it's also going to depend on the maturity of your organization, like your sales organization too. Do you have fresh reps that are like absorbing everything and just like hitting the phones and grinding like crazy? Do you have
right.
more mature reps that maybe you need to like incentivize a little bit more? Defining it for your company instead of coming in with like blanket statements or assumptions, that's how enablement's really going to start seeing like success. And that's how leaders are actually going to start seeing success through the enablement team. We also have to educate sales leaders from time to time to make sure that like enablement at your past company is an enablement at this company. Like it's going to
Yeah.
be shifty a little bit. Um, Spicy opinion. Like,
Yeah, and I mean that's exactly where I was going to say is in my experience, you have sales leaders that come in and say, "I've done this in the past. This is what we're going to do this time,"
sure.
and it's just like that's just not the way it's going to work. Like
Yeah.
there's so many other things that we can look at that apply to this business. They're just not the same as what we've done at other places, and that's a huge problem for sales teams and for enablement, right? Because you can't enable one way and then sell a different way. They just
Yeah.
don't go together.
But you also have
Um,
to like find that common ground between like the what
exactly.
about like what are you seeing as sales leader in the business that leads you to like lead with curiosity more than anything else instead of like shutting it down automatically, just being like, okay, I'm curious, how did that work well at your last company? Why do you think it's going to work well at this company? Let's talk about it and
Yep.
understand. And again, this is where the psychology kind of like comes into play of
Totally.
like working with that leader, of like understanding everybody has different experience, everybody's coming from it with from a different angle and a different viewpoint. Understand or work to understand what that is, and then you'll be able to better and more clearly see, okay, this is where they're coming from, this is why they think the way that they do, and like, great, there's a middle ground there actually.
Totally. Makes total sense. So on that note, how do you have conversations about what success is for enablement
Mm,
historically and even probably to this day? Enablement is a cost center. And we've seen this through the rifts over the last 2 or 3 years, 4 years.
sure.
Enablement's been hit hard. Sales teams have been hit hard. So where do
Hmm.
you see, if your boss today came and said, what are your, I don't like using metrics because like data just often gets in the way, even though I'm like a very
Sure.
much a data person.
Sure.
How do you think of success on the enablement front? Like what's the top three things or X number of things that you would say, hey, boss man, boss woman, here's what defines success for me at the end of the year. Like how would
Yeah.
you convey that?
The way that I look at and approach enablement is usually being able, like, so I want each of the reps or each of the teams that I support to be able to maximize each customer interaction, however that looks for that particular role. So when I'm looking at metrics, what I'm going to be looking at, and this is like I say blanket statement, kind of, or like note to this blanket statement is just kind of like this is like in an ideal world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got like all of the right data and everything's moving and you've got visibility into all of the stuff. Ideally, I'm going to be looking at three different types of metrics. I'm going to be looking at metrics that I can actually affect change on, like accountability kind of metrics, which are things like new hire ramp, new hire productivity, like things that I can actually affect. Trainings that they're attending or passing, certifications, things like that, which like I would say are fuzzier. Like just because they took a training doesn't mean that I'm like doing a great job. It just means that they got heckled enough to take the training or they wanted to take the training, right?
Right.
But like are new hires achieving their metrics? A common one is also like, are they achieving quota? therein lies a little bit fuzzier of a like, but did
Right.
enablement actually affect those things? And I think for each of the individual programs or initiatives that you're going after, you need to define what success is for that program and initiative, and then what the KPI or metrics are. So as an example, like one of my previous companies, we were trying to break into a new persona. I launched this entire initiative basically to train around that particular persona, what they care about, what our value props are that relate to that. Um, Features and functionality of our product that are actually going to speak to that particular persona, take a benchmark right from the get-go. So like our goal at the end of the day was basically to win more business with this new
Right.
persona. So I'm going to start tracking before the training and like the initiative rolled out. These are the number of closed won deals that we had with these titles or this particular persona. This is the number of meetings set that our BDRs were setting. This is like lead to opportunity conversion rate. This is kind
Mhm.
of like sales velocity, blah, 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 like all the way down the line.
Right.
And then post training and reinforcement, now I'm spinning up dashboards in Salesforce to track all of those metrics. And now I can actually see after a quarter, we're seeing like this result, we're getting more meetings, we're doing the things like whatever. Am I like, and for that purpose, then it's like enablement actually did influence that
Exactly.
piece. Any number of other things also influenced it, but enablement took part in that piece. So like accountability metrics, things that I can actually point to and be like, I did influence that in some way, shape, or form from an enablement perspective. The second bucket that I look at is usually like finger on the pulse of the business,
Hmm.
which are things like quota attainment, rep retention. We're looking at like these are things that like you can't really equate to like direct impact. There was one company that I was at that someone was trying to was trying to correlate this rep attended this training and they hit quota. Therefore, my training, them attending my training helped them hit quota. And I was like, I'm sorry, what just happened? Like, you know that meme of like I think it's like Julia Roberts or like the Hangover meme where it's like all of the, I was like, I don't understand how you're
Yeah.
getting to like this
Right.
correlation here.
Right.
And I was an English major for a reason. Like math is not my strong suit. But so that's like the second one is just like finger on the pulse. How is the business doing? Are we close winning deals? What's competition win rates, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third bucket, I know I'm really long-winded on this. The third bucket is like those sentiment feelings.
Hmm.
So sending out surveys, how are the reps feeling? How do they perceive enablement? Do they actually like, do they feel like they can be successful in their role? Do they feel supported in their role? Like how are like all of those things kind of collectively shown to and like wrapped together as a story because like as we all know or maybe you don't know like data can be molded and massaged to tell any story that you want it to tell at the end of the day.
Right.
So from my perspective, I'm trying to incorporate and tell a story with these three different things to get a more comprehensive view. All of that underlined is that like again with the bloodbath of layoffs last year, you
Right.
can do everything right. And I say this on almost every podcast that I've been on now. Like you can prove value, you can prove impact, you can prove that you actually did move the needle on things. And at the end of the day, sometimes it still doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
And I experienced that firsthand, like so
Yeah.
many others. Um, and it just like, but you've got all that shit now on your resume of just like I did
So
this,
true.
and this. Great. Like that's what people want to see.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, in any cost function or like perceived cost function, you're really under the microscope constantly. Like sales, marketing, CS, everybody's going to be like you said earlier, pointing to somebody else, and
Yeah.
inevitably it'll go to who's not driving revenue when it comes time to for cost reductions. If you don't stick up for yourself, if you don't have the plan that you just laid out, basically of like, well, sentiment says enablement works, right? The training attendance is this, and going all the way through the funnel, it looks like there's positive correlation to the outcomes where enablement's involved. So
Yeah.
it's very easy to say, well, enablement's not doing their job because ramp is slowing down. Well, it could just be
Yeah.
the market's slowing down. It's not an enablement issue,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is what we saw over the last 2 years. Very
100%.
cool. Love that answer. I think that's one we're going to definitely clip for for next week. It's just good because like I think a lot of the space doesn't see like the intricacies of what it takes to be an enablement leader. It's just like constant firefighting. And like you were saying when we started,
Yeah.
oftentimes it's like, hey, enable for this product tomorrow. It's like, well,
Yeah.
there's a lot I need to get ready for that. So it's super helpful for people.
And I would also say like to that point really quickly is like choose your battles. Like sometimes like it's
Yeah,
okay to just be like, okay, and understand again, like on the maturity model, understanding like where you are and like where your business is at. Do I wish I could,
right,
have this like beautiful kind of like roadmap of like we're sticking to this and only 20% of my time is dedicated to reactive stuff? Of course I do. But like, it's
right,
just not where
exactly.
like you're just like
It's just not
I've yet
possible.
to be at a startup where that's possible. You
Right,
can make moves in the right direction again, like you can make positive steps forward. But at the end of the day, like sometimes you are going to have to be a little bit more reactive versus proactive, but like choose those battles accordingly.
right,
Make your voice heard, make sure that they understand what's going on. But then at the end of the day, your internal customers still need your help. So like, sure, I just got it like lobbed over the fence, last minute or whatever, and that sucks. And I could put my foot down and I could draw a line in the sand and be like, I'm not freaking doing this.
yeah,
But my reps are going to suffer like at the end of the day. Do I want
right,
that like to happen? No. Can I put process or stuff in place so that we avoid this in the future and like run less fire drills? Yeah, we can try and do that. But
right.
like I want to make sure that my reps are set up for success. I don't want them to like suffer because I am throwing a tantrum. Like that sounds bad,
Right. I
but like
love that. I
yeah.
mean, but it's true, right? It's very easy to just be frustrated. But like to your
Sure.
point, like
Yeah.
every role serves a purpose, right? And the enablement role is so crucial for sales success. If
Yeah.
you're not fulfilling that duty, then they suffer ultimately, which is
Yeah.
such a great point.
Find the balance between strategic, tactical, reactive, proactive. Get yourself like a drum set or a punching bag, which I have both, for those moments where like you just can't, like there's nothing you can do. You're between a
Right.
rock and a hard place. Allow yourself the moment of grief and then just like move
Move on.
forward with whatever the
Right.
best option for you is.
I love it. Cool. Also, total side tangent. This whole time I've been thinking about that drum set, and I just keep thinking of Step Brothers and Don't Touch My Drum Set. So, just
Oh my God, it's been a while since I've seen that
FYI.
movie.
Yeah, I know. So to kind of round out the discussion, I kind of want to talk about the future of enablement.
Mm,
I think your book is a good segue to that because I think at any point when we have a lot of change, which I would say we're at that inflection point right now of hyper growth in like zero interest rate, time into
yeah,
cutting, contraction. And now I think there's this feeling that things are settling down a little bit. The job market's definitely difficult for the enablement community,
yep,
which is probably a separate discussion. But it does feel like under the hood things are starting to settle a little bit, which means there's potential boom or of something like that on the horizon. I personally think there is from a technology standpoint. That's probably a little bit separate, but enablement will stand to benefit from that to a certain
sure.
degree. So, what's your thoughts on the future of enablement, and if you have an opinion on what the impact of AI is going to be, we
Mm,
can kind of follow it up with that. But I think you're like to my original point. Your book is coming at an interesting time because it puts a lot of this together. Like we can get through a lot of growth. We can what's the word I'm trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is when we have high growth, for example, the
yeah,
processes and the maturity models and a lot of those things don't really get the attention they need because things
no,
are working, right?
yeah,
So now it's like, oh shit, we should probably go back to basics to a certain degree and be like, what do
yeah,
we actually want to do here? Like, what's the actual plan? What are the success metrics? Like, how are we going to get from the on-demand enablement phase to like advanced enablement? Like, do we have the capabilities? Do we have the budget? Do we have the people? All those
yeah.
things. Um, so as part of this inflection point, where do you think the future of enablement looks like in the next, 2 to 5 years?
Oh man. If the past 4 years have taught me anything, it's to be like cautious of like looking into my crystal ball. I don't like bird flu is coming now. Like I don't even know. Like, do I need to hunker down again? I don't know what's happening. Um, no, so like I'm like Stephanie started to panic on her on the podcast. It's one of those things where I think from my hope is that like the future of enablement continues to like be defined, and that we've got like smart people, because we've got such a thriving, phenomenal community with such amazing, talented, like giving people in the space. And my hope is that we continue to just like share best practices and march towards this idea that yes, typically we sit under a revenue organization in some way, shape, or form. You can define us as like a cost center, but we are impactful and we do drive the right behaviors, right skills, right development, like all of the things. So my hope for the future of enablement is that we just continue to kind of like beat that drum, and inevitably like shit's gonna hit the fan, right? We saw it at COVID. We saw it like there was like, oh no, there's a recession. No, there's not. All of a sudden, like everything just like shoots
Right.
up again. And just kidding, yeah, there is a recession, and everybody just like wipes the slate clean with everything. Um, but my hope is that inevitably we'll start seeing like less and less of kind of that bloating just across the board from like companies overall, and like enablement will benefit from that lack of bloating, right? They like overhire, and then all of a sudden they realize like when the funds
Right.
are dried up, then like what the fuck do I do now? So it's one of those things where like my hope is that we continue to kind of like beat that drum and define the function and the profession, and like get those best practices, educate leaders and reps alike to understanding like this is what you should be expecting from enablement. This is not what you should be expecting from enablement.
Right.
And ultimately just like continue to mature the profession as a whole. Like if we think about it, in reality, enablement as a profession is really only like 10 to 15 years in like the space, and
Right.
in popularity terms really only like 5 to 7 years. You know, when you
Hmm.
started seeing that, like when my first enablement role I think was like 7 or 8 years ago. So like
Right.
and it was like just starting to like, you searched on LinkedIn for enablement and it was like, what is that? um
Yep.
so that's my hope, is that we continue to kind of see this progression forward of just like maturing of the profession overall, and making sure that like people understand this is the benefit that you can get from enablement. It's not just training. It's so much more that encompasses the entire role and function. Um, and from like an AI perspective, like what does AI mean for enablement? One of the other skills that I've been recommending most recently to people, so I was before starting a Pinecone, I was very anti like Chat GPT, because I was like, that's cheating. Like I don't I don't want some robot to write my shit for me.
Right.
But I also suffer from what I call like blank canvas syndrome, in that like
Yeah.
you hand me a blank canvas and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Like I need
Right.
a suggestion, a jumping off point to then like start the creative ball rolling.
Hmm.
The interesting thing about AI, and especially like learning and being kind of in the AI space here at Pinecone, is that like prompt engineering and prompt writing, that's where everything is. It's not, AI isn't going to take your job.
Right.
Well, it might, but like at the end of the day, like somebody who knows how to leverage AI appropriately might very well take your job, simply
That's
from
right.
like a productivity standpoint. We're asked to do a lot. We're asked to deliver a lot. We're asked to like react very quickly to things. And while that's not, again, getting back to like the maturity kind of model, that's not maybe where we want to be, but it is a necessary step as part of the journey. That's where I found like AI to be incredibly helpful, of just like
Mm.
making me more productive. I might need some ideas, or I might need some input, or like whatever. I love a good whiteboarding session with another enablement professional, but I work from home. Like my husband
Right.
doesn't want to whiteboard with me. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
he's not interested
Exactly.
in that. So if
Right.
I can virtually like collaborate with something like that, that's where I would say I think AI is really going to start like kind of coming into play, is like learn how to write prompts to get what you need and or want out of the systems and tools, and
Yeah.
then just be cautious about the entire thing too.
Yeah, for sure. I think to your point on like sounding like a robot, like it's very
Mhm.
easy to like, oh, I just said draft this email and I sent the email out and it says like,
Yeah.
hey, first name, last name. It's like, dude, did you even pay attention to
Yeah.
this? I
Yeah.
think where I see like a lot of the power is people have more time for creativity now.
Mhm.
It's like to your a blank canvas syndrome. Like, yeah, give me 80% of the way there, and then I'll finish off the other 20%. But in the time that I've saved, I can now like more creatively put together this training for the sales team, right? Or I can
Yeah.
spend more time doing more value add things rather than like looking for information or putting slides together or whatever, those mix and match things of like
Yeah.
redundant, mundane things are. I can actually be better at my job. Enablement is
Mhm.
one of those things where we use a lot of text, we use a lot of presentations, use a lot of things that like aren't necessary, but like I need to spend more time, to your point earlier, on like making sure sales is successful. That's the goal, right? My
Yeah.
goal is not to put together 10 presentations. My goal is to make sure that
Yeah.
sales reps understand them in technical
Yeah.
detail so they can start selling tomorrow, basically.
1000%. Yeah.
Very cool. So, what excites you about the future of enablement? And we've talked about a lot, and you maybe have already kind of answered this to a little bit. Um, we've talked about the community, we've talked about technology, we've talked about kind of getting through the post-COVID lulls and hopefully the end of the Rift situation.
Fingers crossed.
Right. So, what excites you? We'll kind of close it out with that. What excites you about the next year of enablement or the future of enablement?
Um, it's gonna sound a little bit campy and corny, but honestly, I think the thing that excites me the most about enablement is the people in enablement. Whenever I go to conferences or the people that I connect with on LinkedIn or even in some of the communities, um, they're amazing. Like they're such giving people. They're creative. They're brilliant. Like they come with such these desire to want to help not just the people that they support, but then the other enablement communities. Like we are people usually who are attracted to this profession are very giving by nature. So
Totally.
inevitably, the community that's kind of been built of enablement professionals is very giving to each other. So like the thing I'm most excited about for enablement is literally just the people and like the continuation of people finding the profession, bringing in their expertise and their backgrounds. Like, I can't even begin to tell you, like, I've chatted with people who have been like teachers. I chatted with literally somebody who was like an army interrogator that found their way into enablement. Like theater kids, like sales
Yeah.
operations like myself, former AEs, like the amount of experience and background that enablement professionals bring is so varied and differentiated that like
Mm-hmm.
it's hella exciting.
Yep.
I can't believe I used the word hella, but I'm gonna go with it. But like for real, like it's just that's what excites me about enablement moving forward today, yesterday, like in the past is like it's the people like through and through. Like we have collected a really phenomenal like community of people, and I am excited for who else is gonna find the profession in the future.
Yeah, I will actually second that. I'm not an enablement background at all. I'm
Yeah,
data analytics. I'm RevOps, and now with Letter, I'm go to market, but selling an enablement solution, till for lack of a better word. Uh, Everybody I've met has been awesome. Like and I was
yeah, of
totally shocked by because you hear about communities, right? It's like, oh, I'm part of
course.
this like finance community or whatever. It's like, okay, you go to a conference, you pay some money, you go to a
Womp womp.
conference, right? But I'm like, this community is legit. Like, if I talk to you and I talk to somebody else, everyone's like, oh yeah, I know Stephanie. I've read her book already. It's
Yeah,
like like everybody knows everybody, and everyone is, to your point, so giving and so easy to talk to, and comes with different perspectives. I think there's so much there that needs to be kind of like not centralized, but it needs to have like a bigger voice, in my opinion, because
yeah,
I think that like the sales orgs are constantly under so much pressure that like enabling kind of takes a back seat where it's like, I don't know, we have a lot of people over here that have some pretty incredible ideas that
yeah.
need to have a seat at the table. So that's I totally second that statement. I think that's exciting, especially with like getting back to like in-person events and all that
Oh my gosh. Yes.
shenanigans that was not in person. It made it really difficult.
So like if I never attend another Zoom happy hour in my life,
Oh
I
my
I
god!
will be so happy. Like I
I
just
tell you,
can't do it.
I had a Zoom magic show.
Nope.
Yeah, it was
Nope.
funny. to
Like God
watch.
bless the people during the time that we're
Yeah,
like doing the things and like what I like
right.
do what you got to do. You know what I mean? But like
Right.
fuck's sake,
Never
like
again.
I never ever again. Like just no.
Yeah, cool. Well, with that note, we will close it out. And I really appreciate your time today, Stephanie. It was an incredible conversation. Go and read Stephanie's book today. It is incredible read, super helpful for those of us in enablement, those of us not in enablement. Elevate and optimize your enablement maturity journey. Go out, get it today on Amazon. Definitely worth the time.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Appreciate it.